everyone, and welcome to blog 56 of Tackle the Feelings Before the Behavior. And before I begin and tell you what this blog's all about, I just wanted to apologize and say that it's taking a long time to get each video out because I'm in South Africa and currently in the bush, teaching at a little school out there, as I said in my last blog, and the Wi-Fi situation is not great to upload videos, and so I can only do it when I'm on leave or when I'm around some Wi-Fi or have a good connection. So today's blog is going to be called A Little Chat About Codependency. And the reason I wanted to talk about codependency is it's something very present with me at the moment. And we can look at it in parenting and we can look at it in general. And so I'll oscillate a bit into the parenting because people who watch this often are watching it for my parenting suggestions and tips. But today's blog's more about you as a person. And if you've come here, it's likely you've looked at it in the realm of addictions, and codependency is very big with family members and an addict. But it's also really, it's almost a trauma response in some ways. It becomes almost like a personality thing. I don't want to say that, but that's how it feels sometimes because we all develop differently. We all have different childhood trauma. We all manifest that trauma in coping mechanisms that are unique to us, dependent on things like our experiences, on our upbringing, on our personality type, which is a big thing, and our culture and a million other different factors. So for me, with my trauma, I tend to go more towards a codependent way of being. When my trauma comes up, my inner child's wounds are shown, codependency is big to me. But codependency, I don't believe, is isolated. I believe that it is a part of a dynamic that gets set up by two people in a relationship, regardless of who. There's no blame as such. There's blame for certain things, I'm sure, but looking at it objectively, there's no real blame for codependency and the person who's not codependent, and it's often more of a, I don't want to say narcissistic, but that's the best way to describe it. Somebody who's less empathic, more cut off, more self-involved, more concerned about themselves. The codependent person, in my experience, is usually more empathic, sensitive, needy, and they are overtly considerate and maybe even people-pleasing and things like that. So you get these two different personality types that we all have a little of both in each of us. There's no black and white, I don't believe. But usually when you get into a dynamic and you have two sets of different trauma, or even the same trauma but two different personality types, you get a dynamic that is often, you'll see it on Facebook and all that, the empath and the narcissist. I mean, it's very black and white, but that's kind of speaking to this codependent pattern. You get this fixer type person and someone with an addiction. Or you get a really helicopter parent or something, or a non-present parent, or somebody who's not completely tuned into their child, and you may get a codependent or an anxious child who struggles to be separated from you. So it's almost like a bit of separation anxiety evolves into codependency later on. And there's lots of different levels. Everything's on a spectrum. You can read so many things. I'm telling you my understanding and giving a bit of a different perspective from the usual addiction codependency that we have so much information on. So codependency is when we struggle to break ourselves away from that person. It's almost, if you're looking in a therapeutic way and looking at attachment, that primary bond, you often find that there's a real insecure attachment. That person doesn't feel secure within their primary parental relationship and grows up to not feel so self-trusting and confident within themselves. This doesn't mean you're going to be codependent. It could mean that you go in the other spectrum where you cut everyone off and you don't let people in, or you don't trust at all, and it just depends on personality type. Often that primary wound of not having that secure attachment will attract these two opposites together because they are repeating patterns. You almost tend to go for the same things, those parental relationship dynamics that you keep repeating because there's something in you that wants to heal this trauma. Carl Rogers in person-centered therapy would say we all strive, like a potato in the dark strives towards the light. We all, I believe, all are struggling for healing, which means we are constantly getting faced with all our trauma and our challenges. And codependency is a big highlighted neon sign to show you that you do not trust yourself, that you do not value yourself, that your relationship to yourself is very weak. And I say this because if you did, you would be okay with someone not being comfortable. You would be okay with someone going through their own journey. You wouldn't feel that need to take their problems on as your own. You wouldn't want to be fixing them all the time. You would be okay with concentrating on your stuff and letting people do their own. You could be supportive, you could be a friend, you could be compassionate and empathic to that. But when you're codependent, you get overly involved. So much so that the failure of that person to heal becomes your personal failure. Your expectations on that person, on that relationship, on yourself in that become almost impossible to live up to. And that is the disappointment. And then you have false beliefs and beliefs about yourself, and it's almost like you gather this proof. People let you down, that no matter what you do, it's not good enough, that you're lacking, that there's something wrong with you. Often when you have that relationship dynamic, if it's an addict or somebody who's a bit more egocentric, narcissistic personality type people, you get really hurt along the way because they're repelling you. They don't want you to make them your problem. It makes them feel more crap about themselves. And they also, but it's invasive. That codependent energy, if you want to call it energy or way of being, is very intense. It's a lot of pressure for, I would imagine, the other person. And it's also your disappointment in the situation, I would imagine, comes across as disappointment. They feel that you're disappointed in them, and it becomes this cycle. And resentment builds. And at the end of the day, you get so immersed in this relationship that you lose yourself. And often when you're a codependent personality, this starts from really little, and we go on and on and on, having relationship after relationship, often with emotionally unavailable guys or people who are really damaged in some way and looking for escapism, or they're not present, they're not connected to themselves, they're not connected to you. But you, in that trauma from childhood, are actually used to love, in your eyes, being something that's non-connected. Your heart wants the connection, but you're used to love being painful, love being a letdown, love being something that ends, or that that it's so conditional. And it's that conditionality that really shakes you to your very core. And so you're endlessly trying to seek out love from other people, from other things, external things from yourself. And if you are, like me, codependent in some way and found yourself in disappointing relationships where you really struggle to understand how someone could care so little about you or your needs and your feelings, and how this could happen, and why it doesn't come across, and why you become reactive, and why you have this almost morbid latching onto that person that you can't let them go. And you're so confused about what love is and how you should be treated and what you want and who you are. And you can't be in a relationship like that with anybody, even the nicest person in the world, because you're going to drag them down, you're going to drag yourself down, and you're often going to find yourself in rather abusive situations and dynamics because it's so unequal. It becomes parental a lot of the time. It's this power play for control. Both people in the relationship are trying to control. If you look at children, it's the same thing. When you are creating codependency in your children because you're not allowing them to individuate. You're not giving them those opportunities to be empowered. You're not supporting them through their own growth. You're trying to do things for them, or you're not guiding them at all. Children also, they're grappling for control. It breeds an overall anxiety. And the core emotion underneath all of this in codependency is fear. It's a deep, deep fear. It's an overwhelming fear. It's a lack of security, lack of stability. It's really frightening for a person who is facing the unknown, who is feeling so unsure of themselves. And so you may ask what you do about codependency, and I can't say that I'm cured. I certainly am not. But I can share what I've learned and where the path is here. And the path for that is that you need to love that you do this to start with. You need to accept that this is something beautiful. It is something that you have done to survive. This coping mechanism has got you through. You are a beautiful person. We all are. Each and every one of us. We want to make a difference. We want to heal. We want to help people. We have good intentions in what we're doing. But what's happening here is we are abandoning ourselves. When you're codependent, you're often focusing all your energy on the external, on other people, on other things. You've got ideas, everything, that you lose what you want, what you need. And often we're so terrified of being alone, and this is my plight, so terrified of being alone because of that lack of self-trust, because you don't feel good enough, you don't feel that fundamental sense of belonging, that fundamental sense of home. You're so terrified of being alone that you would rather be in an emotionally unavailable relationship and get treated like crap again and again and put up with so much than be alone. And it's only when you can get some support in that and understand that and take a big risk. It's a big risk to let go. And it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. But what needs to happen is those feelings transferred there. Everything you're trying to do to fix the other needs to come within. You need to look at this. You need to look at this and the patterns from your past, from your parental relationships, from when you were little. You need to look at that. And you need to keep redirecting yourself back to yourself every time you feel that kind of pull towards that dynamic. It's really important to look at what's really going on, because love is not pain. Love is not a constant set of letdowns. Your expectations are based on all these beliefs you have, and it's a real process of chiseling it. It's not an overnight thing, and often, depending how codependent you are, the healing work often requires a bit of help. So it's to go easy on yourself. But at the end of the day, codependency is about you, not the other. And if you are getting into codependent relationships, it's time to stop relationships and be in a relationship with yourself and build self-trust. And the way to do that is to confront your biggest fear, and that is to be alone. That is to be alone in all those uncomfortable feelings. That is to be alone knowing that this person that you love might go off the rails. They might die. It's not your responsibility. It would hurt, sure. You might lose that person in a relationship forever. Your child, if it's a child that you are struggling to let go of here, your child might fall down, hurt themselves, make a mess. That's okay. You will be there to support. You can always hold someone's hand through something. But when you're holding someone's hand and pulling them up and pulling them out of their problems, it's not helpful to them, and it is incredibly damaging to you. It's toxic. And that is why we find ourselves in these toxic relationships. And often when you have two people leaning on each other like this person needs all that emotional support and the ego stroked and to be looked after and somebody to always care about them. And this person needs to be the fixer and to feel like they're helping and making a difference. If one person moves away from that and individuates and decides they want to be themselves, the other's going to collapse. So inevitably, somewhere down the line, if you want to heal, if you're codependent, the relationship will crumple. So I hope that's been helpful. Go within. That's where the answers lie. Take care. Bye.